Welcome back to another episode of Mug Up with BBNC. My name is Anise, and with me is Kayla.
Hello, everyone.
And in this episode, we have the honor of having Marie Matsuno Nash with us. Hi, Marie.
Hi. Thank you.
Marie was an early board member of BBNC, chairman and president of the Bristol Bay Foundation, as well as receiving multiple awards within her lifetime. So we are so honored to have you, Marie. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
Can you just introduce yourself for those who may not know you?
My name is originally Marie Matsuno, and then, of course, I have married names after, but I was born in Idaho. My mom and dad and older brother were sent out during World War II when President Roosevelt signed that executive order making all the Japanese and Japanese Americans move from the West Coast and Alaska to different camps further inland. Most of the women didn't have to go, but my mom was afraid, I think, because she had my older brother who was only about 2. And growing up in the village, I don't think she could have managed taking care of themselves without my dad being there. So she wanted to go along, and that's how she and my brother ended up there too.
And so you were born in this camp.
Right. All the people from Alaska went to Puyallup first, which was a gathering place. It was a state fairground, and the federal government took it over from the state and then converted the horse stalls into bedrooms where people stayed, and they made their own beds with the hay and some kind of material. And then they had to wait there until the camp in Minidoka, Idaho was built. So I don't know how long they were there, but I went back for a pilgrimage one year just to see what it was like, because back home, Mom and Dad didn't talk about it much. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people, I think, thought it was a shameful part of their life, so they really didn't want to discuss it too much. I should have brought the map of the camp, but they did have mailboxes and post offices, and there were people that were there that were teachers, and they took over teaching. But you couldn't really get out of there unless you were going to go somewhere into another town or state to work. They had barbed wire fence up there, and there was a guard at each post. The wire was facing inwards, so people wouldn't try to escape from the inside. I kind of went up a trail.
No, you're okay. I think that's a very important part of your story. Like, can you tell us a little bit more about your heritage, your dad and your mom?
Okay. Our mom was a Lutic. I forgot what her birth certificate says, because one said, it just said Kuskokwim. And I thought, why would they do that unless they were out subsistence fishing or something? Mm-hmm. And maybe she was born there at the camp.
Yeah.
But then a later one, I think, said Pilot Point, so I don't know. Our dad was born in Maui. He left Hawaii, and I don't really know how he did that, but I was always curious why he left Hawaii. And then he came over to the mainland, I don't know where, but he was working in the field, so he probably came over like to California or somewhere and worked in the fields there. Made his way up to Seattle, I'm guessing, and got onto a ship to go fishing in Alaska. The other interesting thing was he changed his name, and we never did know why that was, unless he was just trying to hide from his family or didn't want to be caught or something. I have no idea, but our last name was Kamita.
Oh, wow.
And if you ever went to Honolulu, which I did, but there were only 2 Kamitas in the Honolulu phone book, and that was my family. When you looked under Matsuno, that was a really common name like Smith and Brown. There were a whole bunch of them, so I think he was trying to get away and disguise himself, but he established himself out in the village and really learned how to do things out there. He made himself a sled to go trapping, and he learned how to trap, and he took care of all the skins and sold them to make money. And we had a cabin up at the Upper Yugashik Lakes, and we'd go up there usually in the fall. Alec Gretchen would fly us up. We would never land in the big lake because it was kind of shallow and you could see all the rocks below, but there was a smaller lake nearby, and it was big enough for him to land in. When it was time to go back to the village, we'd take the dog sled back home. But I don't know how we all fit on there, because I think there was only my oldest brother, me, and my brother Fred, and my sister. But I can remember one time when they went hunting, Mom and Dad and Paul, and they let me with my brother and sister back in the cabin. And I could look out and I'd see them way up there on the mountainside. And then for some reason I got scared and I started crying. Everybody else started crying, and my mom and dad came home and we were all bawling our heads off. I thought they were never going to get back. And another time I remember them taking a sled back to Ugashik when the spring was almost over. It was icy and slippery, and I was afraid I was going to get stuck there because I was slipping all over the ice, and I'd gotten out of the sled to stretch my legs, I guess. We had a good time up there because it was a beautiful lake, and we'd pick berries and catch fish in the creek, and it was just nice and peaceful, yeah.
It sounds like every year you kind of moved around a little bit to different communities. Am I understanding that correctly? Like some of the year you were in Ugashik, and then where did you spend the other portion of your time?
When I was little, we went up to the cabin. And then one year when the fishing was a disaster in Ugashik, that was like 1954, I think, we had to go down to Pilot Point because there was no fishing allowed in Ugashik. And it was hard going down there because we'd never been down there before, and we were all young, and my mom and dad had a set net site way out from the village, and back then we had no three-wheelers, four-wheelers, or anything like that, so they had to walk back and forth. But instead of doing that, they set up a tent and stayed out there on the beach, and we kids took care of ourselves in this, what they call a Chinaman's bunkhouse. I think the Chinese had been there in the canneries years ago, and the bunkhouses, it was our family and the Enright family. Since the cannery was when we were selling our fish to, they supported us by having us go down there and get food. I was only about 7 or something, I don't know, and we had these lard cans that had wire across for handles, and we'd go down there to the cannery and they'd fill up our tin can with layers of food. One year I was embarrassed. I felt like a little beggar. Finally, I gave in and went. And the people down there, the waitresses, were always really nice. They gave us whatever leftovers they had. So my dad had taught us at home how to read and write. And after he felt like we were educated enough, I guess he took us down to Haynes' house in Haynes, which was run by the Presbyterian Church. And it was kind of like a semi-orphanage, too, for kids that needed a home or had problems in their home and needed to be cared for elsewhere. The first year, my dad took Paul and me, and they didn't know what grades to put us in, so they put us in grade together. And they probably thought, we'd be afraid without each other.
With all of these experiences, from just being born in a Japanese concentration camp all the way to going to the school in Haynes, you've had a lot of different introductions to different types of people and communities. How has that shaped your outlook on the community?
It was hard on us because we really didn't get to know our family. 9 months out of the year when you're not home with your family, you're exposed to different people, you're homesick, and there were no phones back then. You couldn't call your folks. We only had letters to write, and that, of course, took a long time. It just changed us, I think, with a different outlook. In some ways, it was good because we learned different things, but in other ways, we never felt like we were close. Even when my younger brothers and sister came there, we weren't even in the same section. We were in the same building, but on one side was the boys, and then there was a long hall, and then the girls were on the other side where the kitchen and dining room were. The only time I would see my brothers was at lunch, because then when we went off to school, they were in their class, and I was in my own class. And then the only one I could see sometimes was my sister. I'd go down to her dorm and play with her hair and fix her hair, or just visit with her. So I always regretted that we never had that closeness. We're still family and we're still close to some degree, but we never shared a lot of experiences together, like most people do. But we all had different experiences growing up. And when we were growing up and going to school, because my dad as head of household wasn't Native, we weren't allowed to go to Wrangell or Mount Edgecombe, even though we were Native. But because of our dad being the father and not Native, they didn't change that policy until later. Paul and I spent all our years in Haynes, but Fred and Lillian and the others spent their time in Wrangell and Mount Edgecombe. So we all were separate even after that, so it was hard to keep up with family.
How do you think these memories influence the way that you see the world today?
The world is so much bigger than just our village and Haynes are going back and forth. I think we got exposed to a lot of things, too, by getting out of the village, though. we didn't get to learn to drive because there were no cars in our village. And then even at the children's home, I think they only had one station wagon that they would take the boys out one day or on Sunday, and then the next Sunday the girls. I think I was 23 when I finally learned to drive. But on the other hand, we got a lot of different experiences in Haines, but the girls were from all over. And some of those girls came from, well, not just the girls, but the boys too. They came from troubled backgrounds. Because there was one girl there that took off and hitchhiked. She got quite a ways too. But yeah, you grow up faster, I think, and make your own decisions. And they might not always be the best ones, but you do what you can.
It sounds like from a young age you were doing things very early. You talked about commercial fishing at 10 years old, and you were probably trapping at a pretty young age too. Was there any other lessons or advice from your parents or elders or your communities that you lived in that guided how you approach leadership today?
Well, one thing we noticed both with our dad and our mom, they were always really good to other people and helped them whenever they could, because they were hardworking and they knew how to do stuff and take care of themselves. So if they got a moose, they would share it with us other families there. And my mom made the best smoked fish. And these young girls would come down, just somehow they sensed when her fish was ready. They'd sit down.
They smelled it.
Yeah, they'd sit down in her dining table. And she'd bring out a fish right away and share it with them. And if you talk to them today, we knew when Grandma's fish was ready. Yeah, so they really were good to other people. And my dad, I think being one of the few that had a high school education, they would come to him to ask him for help with paperwork. So he would help them and assist in whatever way he can. But the other thing that I learned is after we came back from the war, I always felt weird, like there was something wrong with me, and I didn't really know what it was. But as in most cases, people took property from the ones that were sent to the camps. And I don't know what house we had lived in. I never did ask. There was an old house there that was low and had low doors that I think belonged to my mom's side of the family, and we moved in there when we first came back. Then my dad started building a house next door, and the good thing was the villagers pitched in and helped him. But my sister said to me one time, "Don't you think Mom feels funny going to somebody's house to have coffee and there's her cups or something?" I thought, oh my gosh, I never thought about that, because she never complained, and she was a good person who just kind of went with the flow. But there were things that I wish I'd learned more from her, like crocheting and knitting and splitting fish. They used to talk about how she was such a good fish splitter. There's so many things we just didn't pick up, and we were always there to learn, too, seeing as how we were away from school. I think we wanted to get an education and try to do the best we could for ourselves and for other people. I started to go into nursing, but that was when I couldn't spend the summers there at that college in the hospital trying to miss fishing. So I transferred to Fairbanks, and then I changed my degree.
What did you change your degree to?
Sociology
Okay.
and psychology.
What led you to apply for the BBNC board?
I don't remember exactly why I applied, because I wanted my brother to run, but I don't know why I jumped in there. I felt bad about that. I think what I was thinking at the time when I worked for Senator Stevens, he had two programs that I thought would be good for BBNC because of our youth. One, of course, was Ed Foundation and the scholarships. And at the beginning, we only had financial scholarships for college, but then we expanded it to other forms of assistance. It grew and changed over the years, which was good. And then the other program that I really wanted BBNC to try to incorporate was having interns, high school or college, because I see what our corporations were doing, but I really thought the younger people needed to be trained. And so a lot of them would come for a summer, maybe more than a summer. And then even I think some of them went outside to some of our businesses that we had in the lower 48. So that gave them even more exposure than just being in Alaska. So I thought that was a good program. I don't know if they still do much of that anymore, probably. Oh, they do?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
They
good.
do.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember if I've read stuff on the internet about that, but
Yeah.
so I'm glad that's successful. I think we were one of the first corporations that started the Ed Foundation, and others started incorporating theirs too.
Were you there at the start of the Ed Foundation?
Mm-hmm.
So kind of walk me through the timeline. You graduated with your sociology and psychology degree from Fairbanks. And how old were you then? 21 or so, maybe?
Yes.
So how old were you when you established the Education Foundation?
I think we'd have to go back in the paperwork and figure it out. But I
In your
did
20s?
probably older.
Okay. So were you on the BBNC board and you thought, man, we really need to help our kids. We really need scholarships. Was that your thought process?
That was what I thought we should do.
Yeah.
Because I knew there wasn't much money in the villages. And whatever they wanted to do, I thought we should try to help them. And I think more of them probably opened up their own ideas as to the possibilities that maybe they could do something for themselves too, since their family probably couldn't. So money was available to them for colleges, but also the job training type work. I guess I was just always trying to help young people because Senator Stevens' intern program, he started out with high school and then he expanded to college. Senator Stevens really wanted to help young people too, and I think that's where it rubbed off on me because one summer his whole family went home. They had 5 kids. He and his wife Ann and the 5 kids went home, and he started his first program then. My then husband and I went over there to be house parents. We stayed at the house with those kids, drove them to and from work every day with us, and I think it changed a lot of those kids too. It opened up their eyes that they could live and work in a big city.
Mm-hmm. So you would say that your time working for Ted Stevens really inspired your work at BBNC.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like BBNC and the Bristol Bay Foundation have come such a long way since the 70s, since the 80s, in the last 50 or so years. When you think about the future of Bristol Bay or BBNC or the Bristol Bay Foundation, is there anything specific that gives you hope?
Well, I hope that a lot of the shareholders that are eligible take advantage of the programs offered here. I mean, we're established for the shareholders, and our intent is to, of course, make a successful business and earn money and improve the lives of our shareholders out in the rural areas. I know at one time there was an issue about jobs because most of the people are out in the villages and most of the jobs were in town. And so we couldn't always employ people, but there's been a lot more diverse training and education, I think, thanks to the foundation and the support of the board, that people have more opportunities. And I think about people that have gone to medical school, and while I haven't met them, I'm really proud of them because I think that's a tough road to hoe, and they have to be smart, they have to put in a lot of work. But those kinds of jobs make it a little bit more flexible because they could work back in our region as health aides or for the state, for the health corporation even. I just like to see better opportunities, and not just for the smart kids that are going to medical school, but we need plumbers, we need electricians, we need everybody under the sun to keep your household running. And so even those scholarships that help with training like that is really important. And the one-time one, I think they did something like for HAZWOPER training, maybe give you enough money to be work in the HAZWOPER field. I think those are really helpful. Trying to be a little bit more flexible and yet helping our shareholders in whatever their needs are, not where we want to place them or not all steer them to a college degree. So I thank all of you for what you're doing. It's great. It's great to see it so successful.
Well, we wouldn't be here without past board members like you and all of your great ideas. So back at you, Marie. As we kind of close out, do you have any lessons from your life and leadership you'd like to pass on to our future generations?
I think sometimes those of us from the rural region, villages, might not feel comfortable taking on some new issues or new challenges that we haven't faced before. And I hope that everybody else will try to give them encouragement and invite them and maybe spend some time talking to them. It's great to see our own shareholders getting some of those well-deserved jobs that help the people, and it makes a difference in the health of a lot of the people in the villages. And even in here, if they're working in town at the Native Hospital or any hospital here, I just think it's wonderful that they can do that and that the board supports them, the foundation supports them, and I'm just glad our corporation is successful too. I think the leadership has been really good under our current president. And thank you, too, for joining the corporation, too.
Oh,
I'm pleased to have met you.
yeah, I'm so pleased to have met you too. Well, it sounds like you've taken a lot of what your parents have shown you. You know, earlier in our conversation, you talked about how you learned from your parents to help others. You've been a catalyst for helping our shareholders and now descendants with the Ed Foundation, and even on the board, and making those decisions. Now you're sharing that, you want others and our shareholders and descendants to help others. So I'm really inspired by just your life and continuing that theme of and helping others, because that really is a part of not only Bristol Bay culture, but Alaska Native culture.
Well, and to top that, I'm glad that effort that we had going, it's a corporation that passed, right?
Yes. The descendant enrollment.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, as we close, is there anything else that you want to share with our listeners?
No, but thank you for listening, because I was telling the ladies here that I'd never listened to a podcast before, never participated in one, but now I'll try to check on BBNC's podcast. Anyway, well, thank you for inviting me.
Yes.
Appreciate being included.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing your wisdom, your stories. I'm sure this will be a great episode. And I just want to thank our listeners for joining us. Make sure you follow us on Spotify or anywhere you get your podcasts. With that, thank you.
Bye, everyone. See you next
Bye.
time.
For millennia, Bristol Bay has been a part of us. Wherever we travel, it remains home. From our elders to our descendants, we are connected through a shared promise to protect our home and our native way of life. For today, tomorrow, and every generation to follow. Time marches on, but we remain one Bristol Bay. Bristol Bay Native Corporation, always more than a corporation.